I just want to take a little bit of time to introduce like our organization and make sure that you know why we're here and why we're doing this. We really appreciate your attendance tonight. Men4MAAV is a group that's like a subset of the Melrose Alliance Against Violence, which hopefully you're all very familiar with. And our real mission is to develop a network of individuals and organizations to work with men and boys to promote and cultivate those healthy relationships, gender equality, mutual respect, and just overall healthy masculinity and better men. So this is one of our attempts at doing that, is really reaching out to families and dads in particular to start having different conversations and having different relationships with our kids so that we can put them on a great path for success and make sure that they're supported and that we're really leaning into all the skills that you already have as parents, but also learning from some experts tonight that have been doing this for quite some time and have worked with a lot of families. So my hope for tonight is that you enjoy this kind of conversation. The panel is going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll open up for the Q&A. One thing I want to make sure you are aware of is that the beginning of this is going to be recorded. When we go to the Q&A piece, we'll be sure to turn that off so that you feel comfortable and feel free to jump in and either vocally or in the chat. But for the first part, it's going to be recorded. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to one of my colleagues, is Charlie, and he's going to introduce the panel for us, and we're going to highlight them and pin them up here so you can see them. The last thing I'll say is if you want to have a cleaner view here, if you go to the right-hand corner of your screen, if you go to speaker view, that would probably be the best way to view this. Charlie, you there?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'll hand it off to you, man.
Thank you, Ryan. So about our panel, Sam Healy is a Melrose-based licensed individual clinical social worker who has been working with kids, adults, and families for over 25 years. Sam employs the nurtured heart approach and focuses on strengths, solutions, and an inherent drive towards success, alignment, and well-being. Sam has worked in the school providing training and support to schools and aftercare centers. Sam was the director of core support and education at City Year, served as clinical director at the Boys and Girls Club of Boston, and was featured in the PBS special Raising Cain, Exploring the Inner Lives of America's Boys. So welcome, Sam Healy. Next panelist is Heidi Randall. She's the program director at Maine's Boys to Men. Maine's Boys to Men seeks to address the healthy development of boys in the context of their relationships, socialization process, and cultural environments. So Heidi brings over 25 years experience in program design, development, and delivery, and she created a youth engagement program that spanned all of Maine, serving diverse communities and promoting adult and community partnerships with young people. Maine's Boys to Men offers boot camp for new dads, the Modern Masculinity Training Institute, Men Connect, and Men Connect for new Mainer programs for male identified adults. So check out www.maineboystomen.org for more info on that program. Our next panelist is Mike Ramos. He works for the Children's Trust and he coordinates the Fathers and Families Network. Family Network, pardon me. It's a statewide networking and training group for family support professionals to help them enhance skills, learn strategies for engaging fathers, and coordinate services across the state. He also coordinates the Nurturing Fathers program, which helps fathers build and strengthen positive parenting attitudes and behaviors. He was nominated for the Fatherhood Award for his positive parenting, mentoring, and role modeling. So welcome, Mike. Next panelist, our last panelist, is my friend Craig Norberg-Bohm. He's a consultant, recently retired from 15 years working with Jane Doe, Inc., the Massachusetts Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence. Craig is founder and past director of Jane Doe, Inc.'s Massachusetts White Ribbon Day campaign. In addition, years ago in 1978, Craig was one of the founders of RAVEN, which is Rape and Violence End Now, in St. Louis, Missouri, one of the earliest men's centers in the United States, established to engage men to end men's violence against women. So Craig is the founder and president administrator for the North American Men4MAAV Network, a regional member of the International Men4MAAV Alliance. He is also currently president of Community Works, a fundraising federation made up of cooperating social justice organizations across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And that is our panel. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So this is Craig. Hi, everyone. And great to see all your faces, and wonderful to be in this group this evening. I'm the delight to moderate the panel, so I'm not going to speak so much as to coordinate the great content and voices of our other three panelists. It's such an honor. I'm going to say a few words of introduction and say a bit about the content, and then introduce each panelist, and we'll move on from there to questions and answers. So everyone back, relax. We'll hear some great contributions over the next half hour, 45 minutes. So I'm really honored to be on this panel with Heidi, Sam, and Michael to talk about parenting and dads. And talking about dads is very exciting for me and close to my own heart, as I'm a dad myself. So I do have a personal stake, as I know many in the audience this evening do. My career has been one of focusing on male offenders of domestic violence and sexual assault, which has led me to also then work on long-term prevention. What is prevention? And it turns out, in my view, a promotion of healthy ways of life, healthy masculinities in general with men and boys is a focus of mine. I really enjoyed that work. Encouraging fathers to be active, supportive, and nurturing dads is really all about this. And one of the best ways I know to help build healthy, safe, and respectful communities. Certainly not the only way to build safe and respectful community, but an important piece to that puzzle to be sure. I want to make a remark here that we don't mean to be entirely heteronormative in our conversation, about not assuming that all families are male-female couples, but there certainly many are. But we want to acknowledge and take into account the full range of families that are in our audience, in our world: blended families, single parent families, same-sex families. All of these families are able to be successful, in my view, certainly my experience, are also impacted in some way by the norms of our world, such as masculinities. And so that enters into this conversation about raising boys to men. And it's a framework. And what do we mean by men? What do we mean by masculinities? What do we mean by all of these gender frameworks? But having said that, I want to start turning to the panel. As I mentioned, each of our panelists will have about 10 or 15 minutes to speak. I'll ask a few questions along the way, and after everyone has spoken, we'll address questions from the audience. And feel free to post them in chat. We'll receive the chat, and we'll be cataloging this, and Charlie and others will bring those questions up as we go along, mostly at the end. Please watch your mute button on your bottom left on the screen for most. I'm not sure where it is on your phones, those of you who are on your phones. But check that you're muted so that the background noise can be a distraction, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. So thanks everyone again for participating this evening. It's very exciting. First up, we'd like to hear from Heidi Randall. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. You're from Boys and Men in Maine. Tell us about that and what you would like to say about supporting boys and fathers and this whole subject. You have the floor.
Oh, it's such a big topic. It's so great to be here with folks who are interested in talking about this tonight. I'm just going to share a little bit, and then I'm really interested and excited to hear what your questions are and to hear from the other panelists. But I would just first like to say that I'm a former teacher and a former athletic coach. So I have worked with all genders as a middle school coach and a high school coach. And I am also a parent myself, and I have been committed to the field of gender-based violence prevention for over 30 years now. So that is how I find myself here. I absolutely love talking about youth, working with youth, and elevating youth voice. I just really enjoy that aspect of my job. So I just wanted to start a little bit by telling you about Maine Boys to Men very briefly. Just gonna move this out of the way. So we envision a world where all people of all genders are equally valued, respected, and safe. Very simple. And our mission is to end all forms of gender-based violence and self-harm, to advance gender equity by supporting the development of self-aware, empathetic boys and men. So that is our mission statement, and that is what all of our programs seek to impact. I just quickly want to draw some attention to some really amazing resources. The ones on the left are specifically for Maine, but the ones on the right are text lines, primarily teen and youth text lines. So if people want to screenshot this, I can also put a link to this handout later on in the chat. But these are great resources to make available to young people, to help them process and talk through. It's my understanding that young people prefer text lines over helplines and chat lines. So these resources on the right here are very helpful for youth. We like to use permission slips in our programming. And so I created really quickly a parenting permission slip. And the first piece of this permission slip is that we give ourselves permission to be imperfect. Complicated issues don't always have one correct answer. So we give ourselves permission to be incorrect. We have permission to struggle with any of these topics that come up tonight and be upfront and honest about our feelings. We can change our minds about the approach we want to take parenting our children, and we get to choose our own parenting style, whether that's different from the way we were parented or similar to the way, or similar, either way we get to choose. Basically, one of the points I'd like to bring up tonight is the pressure that gets put on young boys and the messaging that they receive about what it means to be a man, which we believe is one of the most destructive phrases in our current culture of raising boys. These are what we call man boxes. So this is an exercise that we do with middle school and high school students as well as adults. And what's interesting is that no matter what age the population we're working with is, whether it's a middle school student, a high school student, or an adult, the boxes all end up looking the same. And so what we do is we ask the students or the adults to think about all the messages they get about being a man. And we put those inside the box here. And you can read some of these messages, things like, not allowed to cry, power, muscles, tall, beard, tough, I can handle anything. I must be an athlete, I must be a player, I must be heterosexual, all of these different kind of messages that young people get stereotypically about what it means to be a man. And then after that, we ask them to consider, well, what happens if you don't kind of exemplify or perform masculinity in these ways? Like, say, for example, you're not a football player, or you don't drive a big truck, or any of those things, or maybe you don't drink large amounts of alcohol, things that go against these, stereotypical messages of what it means to be a man. And then what we hear from the students is that they get called names. So language is used to enforce these stereotypes. So on the sides outside of the boxes are sort of the language that gets used in a way to police other boys' masculinity and invite them or pressure them back into the box. And what we don't have on these particular graphics, but we often usually write along the bottom, is, well, what are the consequences of feeling like you have to fit into these boxes? And as you can imagine, the consequences of feeling like you have to fit this very narrow stereotype of what it means to be a boy or be a man are things like self-harm, are things like fighting, proving your masculinity, maybe risky behaviors, maybe alcohol and drug use, maybe depression, maybe feeling isolated, maybe mental health issues, using violence to prove your masculinity towards others or to prove that you're strong, things like this. So what we didn't get to show you in the clip is that even from the youngest, young boys all the way up as they're growing up, they're getting these really clear messages, even if they're not coming from, say, the parents, or they're getting messages from movies and from TV and from books and from video games and all the different places, social media. They're getting these, what we call the dominant story in our culture of what it means to be a man. And so that often leaves young people, and I may also say that other genders receive messages as well about their gender. If you're female identified, you get all kinds of messaging about what that means. And if you're not either male or female identified, you get a lot of messaging about what it means to not belong to either one of these groups. And so what we hear from young people and what we can know probably from our own memories of growing up within this gender construct is that it can feel very confining, and it can feel like there's a lot of pressure to be something that maybe doesn't align with who we are within ourselves. And this can cause a lot of, problems socially, problems emotionally, making young people feel like they don't fit in or they're not living up to the expectations of our culture. And how this relates to parenting is that I don't think that any young person can escape sort of this social construct, right? We're raising our children within this dominant story of gender, and it can make it very difficult for young people to kind of navigate their transitions from young person to adulthood with this kind of mixed messaging of what it actually, how do they define themselves in our culture. So in terms of the three topics we're going to be talking about tonight, the first one being tips and tools, the three things that we think are the most important at Maine Boys to Men and that we constantly return back to in all of our curriculums, all of our program, are what we call like the three pillars of empathy, connection, and belonging. So if we can show empathy and we can teach the skills of empathy to young people, then they have that ability to see other people with empathy and expect that for themselves. Connection is very important. Are we, as parents, are we feeling connected to our children? Are we making choices? Are we having conversations in a way that builds connection and strengthen connection? Or are the way that we're interacting with our children creating separation? And then belonging is really important. It's very important for all young people and all children to know that they belong somewhere, whether that's within a group at school, whether that's within an athletic team, whether that's at home, within their family unit. But that sense of that they belong somewhere is very important. As parents, it's very important for us to assist in removing these pressures to perform gender in ways that are harmful to themselves and to others. So that might mean, it may seem sort of, a very obvious example of this is if your child wants to, let's say, try a new sport, and maybe it's seen as more of a feminine sport, and maybe they used to always play football and they're really good at football. But they really want to try, this other thing. Maybe it's cross-country running, or maybe it's ballet or swimming. They're probably feeling pressure to kind of stay within that box of the thing that they're good at, but really encouraging our children and not being part of that dominant story of putting pressure on young people to kind of be a certain way. We talk a lot at Men4MAAV about something called the whole self, and that is to say that, you know, we're not as simple, we're human beings and we're complex people, we're whole human beings irregardless of our gender, and we can't fit who we are into a very narrow stereotype of what it means to be a man. And so it's just really important to remind our young people of that all of the things that they love, all of the things, all of the aspects of who they are create their whole self, not just one small definition. How we live our lives as parents gives our children permission to do the same. So if we're emphasizing our whole selves outside of a very negative, small, narrow gender stereotype, that gives them permission to do the same. Isolation comes up a lot for young people as they're trying to transition through, and especially for young boys. It's really important in families to end isolation. When there's a problem, to take the problem and not have it between you, but instead put it in front of you together and look at it together, saying things like, how can we change this together? How can we work together to figure this problem out, instead of putting the problem in between you, helps end isolation. This other one I have here, which is the gift of accountability early on. So oftentimes as parents, we want to shield our children from kind of experiencing anything unfortunate or uncomfortable or bad. And sometimes when our children act out or do something wrong, maybe we want to sweep it under the rug, or maybe we want to say, oh, well, you didn't really mean to do that. And especially if this affects other children or other people, it's very important to give our child the gift of accountability early on, right? So giving them an opportunity to learn from a situation where they may have hurt someone else's feeling or harmed somebody else, to not sweep that under the rug. Just moving along. The key things that we talk about at Men4MAAV a lot about boys' growth and development are vulnerability, empathy, connection, engagement, belonging, social emotional learning. Again, this connection versus isolation. So all of these themes are what we call the counter story to the stereotypes of masculinity. So instead of always expecting young boys to show strength, modeling vulnerability, elevating vulnerability, praising vulnerability as a strength, as a leadership skill. We talked about empathy, connection, engagement, belonging. We talk a lot about social emotional learning at Men4MAAV. Being able to describe our feelings, teaching young boys how to describe their feelings. There's a great handout on the web you can look for called the feelings wheel chart, having that available and asking young children to describe how they're feeling, checking in with them, having that kind of reflection and dialogue part of your day-to-day life as a family. Another thing we do a lot of at Men4MAAV is called porcupines and puppies. So tell me about something that didn't go well today. A porcupine. What was your porcupine today? What was your puppy today? What felt good today? This ability to be able to understand our own feelings, reflect them, and communicate them to others is a building block of social emotional learning, and helps build skills for young people as they grow and learn and move on. Specifically, when we think about dads as positive role models, if you've had experiences where you felt pressure to perform masculinity, share those experiences with your children, or gender in general. Like, you know, I remember this time when my uncle told me, you know, I had to do this and this and this, or whatever, you know, like share those, talk about those, process those out loud. It helps break away that dominant story of masculinity and gives some other counter examples. As fathers, we often want to you may often feel pressure to solve all the problems yourself for everyone. Instead, asking others or solving problems for other people, instead ask, how can I be helpful? How can I support you in solving this problem? Modeling gender equality obviously is very important. Our sons and daughters are kind of watching all the time, like, how are we navigating these issues? And they will behave similarly. There will be millions of examples of the dominant story in our culture. So when you see them in movies, unhealthy masculinity showing up, make it a teachable moment, have a conversation about it. You know, it can be easy, it can be embarrassing and awkward. Instead, elevate that embarrassment and awkwardness and bring it into the light and talk about it together. Upstander intervention, if you have the opportunity to interrupt something where somebody is harming another person, even if it's emotional or a slight or a joke, if our children watch us interrupt that behavior, they then know how to do it themselves. Celebrate the learnings from failures. We often teach our young people that you can never fail, you have to be perfect, things have to go a certain way. Let's celebrate those failures. We actually learn so much more from failing often than we do from succeeding. Apologize all the time and model how to do it. Oh, I was wrong about that. Or, oh, I'm sorry I did it that way. Oh, can we do that again? Just like give it some levity and be able to learn to teach how to apologize. Again, we talked about parents often rushing to solve problems or erase feelings. Those are missed opportunities. So allowing feelings and problems to have space and breathe. Our relationships are stronger when they're forged through fire, shared reality, you know, letting young people know that you can hold space with them around their problems, and having home be a safe harbor.
Amazing.
And I just will close out. I want to give lots of time for folks to talk, but you can follow me, Boys to Men, on social media. And we are now releasing a monthly podcast from our Youth Advisory Council, specifically on topics of youth and masculinity. So check us out on Apple or Spotify.
Heidi, it's great. Thank you so much. I mean, I have the sense that you could take the next hour and give us so many tips and pieces. So thank you for your presentation. I look forward to hearing questions people have regarding these pieces. So thank you. So next up, we're going to hear from Sam Healy. And Sam, I'm so glad you could join us this evening again. And you're a local family therapist, if I'm not mistaken. Talk to us about your experience and what you have suggestions for parents, tips and tools and whatnot.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm honored to be on this panel and to be a part of Melrose Alliance Against Violence. I feel like it's one of the crown jewels of Melrose, and really, you know, is all about what I find is the most important aspect in working with children is the quality of relationship that adults, significant adults have with children. And, you know, so what I'm going to talk about is an approach that I use with parents. I teach with parents, and also that I have worked in numerous schools around New England, teaching this approach on how to work out classroom discipline and all, because it's, you know, teaching through relationship is really, you know, it's what the MRI technology and the brain studies are showing us is what the great teachers have intuitively known all along, that it is the quality of the relationship with significant adults that's having the most powerful influence on how children learn, on how children learn tasks, skills, and the ability to have self-control. And this approach I'm going to talk to you about really helps us channel relationship and how to help children be their highest potential. And so, again, so since we know that the relationship is the most powerful dimension influencing how children learn, the relationships with these significant adults that are, you know, mostly parents, but they are aunts, they are uncles, they are grandparents, they are teachers, coaches, mentors. Anybody who has significant time with a child is literally shaping the architecture of their brain with the specific interactions, the quality interactions they're having with these children. So given this knowledge that we have, we can choose what we give relationship to. And typically, adults give most of the relationship and attention to what's not working, and unintentionally rewarding the negative behaviors. And so, we want to teach a child how to be respectful, and often we choose the moment when they're being disrespectful. And I can tell you from my own experience that when there's a disrespectful moment, that child is not really open to learning anything from their adult, because they're in their defense mode, and also the adult is not in the best space. And so anything we want to teach, we try to look for moments of success. That's how the brain learns, is through moments of success. And so typical and conventional methods are upside down. Whatever we give our relationship to will grow, and everything we say sticks and builds a child's self-concept and their like self-worth, and even their self-talk. Our words become their self-talk. And so the emotions of the moment, the emotions of the interactions, are the glue that are helping that moment stick to who that child is for, they're all their future learning. And so this approach that I teach, called the Nurture Heart approach, it's developed by this guy, Howard Glasser, who wrote one of the best-selling book called Transforming the Intense Child. And again, I teach it, and I also have used it with my own children. And I actually had to learn this through my own humbling experience of being a parent. And I've been doing this for a long time, but realized that, until you become a parent, it's you don't really know what you're doing. And so this is in 3 parts. There's 3 strategies, and Howard Glasser calls them stands because they're very intentional. They're very purposeful, and they're kind of simple. They're kind of simple strategies, but they're not easy to do. And so I'll list them, and then I'll go over them in a little more depth. The first one is refuse to give big reactions to big problems, or give big reactions to problems, mistakes, or misbehaviors, or broken rules. The second one would be having clarity about what the expectations, rules, and consequences are. And then the third one is relentlessly looking for positive behaviors and recognizing those positive behaviors in the moment of success. And so I'll go back to the first one, is refusing to give big reactions. So it's setting limits with as little interaction and emotional energy as possible, without yelling, without lectures, without punitive punishments, punitive interventions, without big explanations or lectures. And this is really hard to do because we want to give a lecture in the moment. But again, the child is not open to learning in that moment. And I can tell you that the adult is not in their best self in that moment either. So we're trying to teach these important life skills in these very intense moments. And it often, goes backwards. And so anything we want to teach, we want to do it in the moment of success. And we just want to get through the limit as soon as possible. And that's where we need to have clarity about what the expectations, the rules, and the consequences are. And so having predictable bedtimes, having predictable how much screen time a day, having predictable consequences for certain behaviors. And then the consequences for behaviors, and this is counterintuitive, is just an immediate, brief, and mild timeout. It's just a pause in the action. And then what the pause does is it stops the behavior that's happening. And so this is non-punitive. And again, I know our culture kind of goes against this, but the more you just kind of create a pause without the big reactions, then a child is able to take accountability for misbehaviors that happen. And so for what I teach for preteens and teens is to just have them put the phone on the desk. And, every preteen and teen's got a phone, right? And they can't even breathe without this phone. And so not having that phone just for a second will shift their behavior. And so you don't want to get into a battle of trying to take the phone away. Just have an agreement that I just want you to put the phone on the desk for 10 to 30 seconds, or as soon as you are able to kind of adjust and stop the behavior. And once that behavior is over, you get the phone back. And so it's kind of like a video game. It's just a redo. It's a reset. And so this reset is a life skill, and that children need to learn, is how to pause what they're doing and just take a deep breath and start over. And what I found is that, you know, for an adult to do this, to give a reset, they have to reset themselves also. So they're not giving big reactions to the moment. And again, I'm not saying this is easy. This takes practice and takes work, but the less reaction, emotional reaction you're giving the moment, the more you're able to help the child take accountability for the behavior that they, or the rule that they just broke. And so then the last stand or strategy, third one, and again, all these stands are as important as the other. It's like a three-legged stool that in order to stand, everyone needs to be strong. And so the last one is relentlessly look for and energize positive behaviors and successes as they're happening. Because again, what we give our relationship to will grow. Whether we want to teach focus, resiliency, responsibility, compassion, whatever we want to teach, give it the details and the emotions that we usually reserve for the negative behaviors. And so when a child is you know, showing responsibility of doing their homework, go right in there and tell them how responsible they are of doing their homework. That is when to give the lecture. In the moment of success, tell them how important the ability to do homework is, how important it is to kind of stay with the math problem, how powerful that is. Because what we're doing, again, is we're giving our relationship to the moment of success, literally shaping their muscle memory of that moment. And so we're rewarding that moment of success. And again, our interactions are shaping who they are. And so then not only what is happening, not only do we give our relationship to what is happening, but also what's not happening, because children are making incredibly powerful and strong decisions all day long. And so can we see these? Can we see the decision of a boy who is really angry and is choosing not to be reactive and not to break something? We can say, you know what, Ryan, I can see that you're really angry right here, and you're choosing not to be reactive. You are hanging on to your big emotions. So what we're doing is we're reflecting back the irrefutable evidence of their ability to manage their emotions. We're using the moment and the experiential success, and our relationship is the most powerful way they can learn these skills. And so the other part is that not only are we looking for the moment of success, but it's key to notice a child's essence, their natural interests and natural talents, so we can honor who they are and what they have to offer to the world just by being themselves. So Brian, I can see that you're a great listener and you are a really good friend. And that is a life skill that you can take with you wherever you go. Your ability to just listen to people is just a beautiful thing. And when we honor a child for who they are, we're nurturing their inner greatness and what they have to offer the world. And if we can use these three strategies to help our children grow and learn, become their best selves, I think that is just a really powerful strategy. I've had great success teaching adults on how to help their child be their best self. So thank you for the time.
Thanks, Sam. It's wonderful. You'll notice in the chat that your handout's posted. So folks ought to be able to click on that and have a look at the detail you've mentioned. I love that there's some examples about what is a successful moment to focus on. Sounds like it'd be a reframe for a lot of parents. You know, I'm mad right now. I'm going to tell you how mad I am right now. But how do I say, I'm excited about you and happy with you right now? It's a different way to focus time. So thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we're going to move along for our third panelist and hear from Mike Ramos. Hi, Mike. Wonderful to have you with us. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Craig, so much.
You bet. You're with the Children's Trust and the Fatherhood Initiative there. Tell us about your experience and what your network has to offer and such. So you have the floor.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Children's Trust and the work that I do there as the Fatherhood Initiative Coordinator. But also just preface this by saying I've been referred to and as the fatherhood expert or a fatherhood engagement expert. And if you saw my house on any given day of the week, especially right before school with a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, you would not refer to me as a fatherhood expert. However, I began my journey on, I like to say fatherhood is a journey, not a destination. I began that journey in realizing how very important fatherhood and parenting was when I found myself a single dad of a 18-month-old and a 2.5-year-old years ago. And that's when I realized how very important it was and why Children's Trust is such a great fit for me to be the Fatherhood Initiative Coordinator. So I do want to talk a little bit about the work because those directly relate to probably some of the topics and the questions that may come up later, but also because I think it's an important resource for folks to know. So there's 3 main aspects of my position, and I couldn't possibly tell you the work that Children's Trust does because there is so much incredible work that they do for parenting. However, as far as the Fatherhood Initiative Coordinator, one of my jobs is to coordinate the FFNs. The FFNs is it stands for Father Family Network, and it's a network of professionals that strategically are placed throughout the state. So Children's Trust funds 7 FFNs throughout the state of Massachusetts, and each one, so there's one in the western part of the state, one in Cape and the Islands, and everywhere in between. And the goal is to have professionals have a place to meet quarterly and talk about the best practices when it comes to fatherhood. And one of the other things that I do is we fund Nurturing Fathers programs. For anybody who doesn't know, Nurturing Fathers is a 13-week evidence-based curriculum that basically has men meet in a group, and they have men explore the relationship or lack thereof with their own father. And they kind of take a look at the positive things that a male role model or their dad did bring to their relationship, and also maybe some of the more negative things. And there's exercises where they decide what kind of father they want to be and take some of those positive things and maybe leave some of the other things behind that they really don't want to bring forward into their parenting style. So what we do is we fund Nurturing Fathers programs throughout the state of Massachusetts. We have some in the House of Corrections in 3 different counties. We have Nurturing Fathers programs in the community. I'm a facilitator and also a trainer. One of the things that I think is incredibly and fascinating too about the Nurturing Fathers program is that it gives men an opportunity. It's some of the things that we're talking about toxic masculinity and boys being able to be empathetic. And Heidi, you did such a great job. I love that man box exercise, talking about what it means to truly be a man. And Nurturing Fathers is a great place for men to explore their feelings and emotions, which sometimes when they're coming into the group, they've never done before. Because oftentimes there's very socially acceptable behavior in places for women to gather and talk about parenting, talk about problems, talk about issues, things that are bothering them. But there isn't a place for men to go where they feel comfortable, because we're not supposed to feel, we're not supposed to have emotions, we're not supposed to cry, we're supposed to be very robotic and made from concrete. And it's true, because when I go get my hair cut, I don't walk into the barbershop and hear a bunch of guys sitting around going, hey, I wanted to tell you, I'm having issues nurturing my son. That's not the conversation that's going on there, because men don't have a place to feel safe. And one of the great things about Nurturing Fathers is it breaks down that kind of stereotype and allows men to be able to express themselves and talk about some of those very things like parenting and relationship things with other guys. And oftentimes the men who come in really hard as stone and not talking are the ones that become the speakers, and the ones that come in speaking are the ones that become quiet and become the listeners. And men cry more than you could ever imagine a man crying. And we talk about some of the things that perpetuate the notions that men are supposed to be tough, and some of the mistakes that we make sometimes as parents when we say, as a little boy, 3 or 4-year-old boy picks up a doll and we yell and say, put that doll down. Dolls are for little girls to play with, not boys. And when the little girl picks up the doll, we buy her a carriage, we buy her the Easy Bake Oven, we buy her diapers, and we teach her how to care for, nurture, and take care of that little baby doll. The horrible mistake and tragedy in that is that what we don't realize is that that's the very first time that this little boy has had the opportunity to learn nurturing, to learn empathy, to learn caring and emotion. It's okay for a little boy to pick up a doll, and we should be encouraging the boy to learn how to change the diaper. Because guess what? When I found myself a single dad, I needed those skills and I needed to know those things. And it wasn't easy for me to ask for help. And it wasn't easy for me to try to figure out how to do those things without some type of support or knowledge that I could have or should have had. So I feel like in some cases I learned the hard way. And a lot of the work that I do is to hopefully help dads understand that these things are okay, that it's not a danger in any way. It's harmless, and in fact, it's healthy. It's healthy for a little boy to understand and to learn how to be nurturing, because that is the very first moment that they're going to learn how to change a diaper or be nurturing. So when I was 16 years old and someone handed me my niece for the first time, I went, oh, like so many men do. Oh, I don't want to break the child, and I don't know how to hold them. Well, I would have known how if I played with a doll maybe for a few months when I was 4 years old. It's very little simple things like that that really changed the course. And I love what Sam said about moments of success. Ironically, I have something too. I kind of look at them as moments of openness. So we do best and worst part of the day when we're having supper, which is just a very silly, common thing. But when you want to address things with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and even teenage daughters, and you're sitting around a table and there is no expectation and it's not in response to a behavior, and you're not trying to pry something out of it, like what happened earlier today? Why were you upset? And why were you, frustrated in the moment? Instead, at the table, what was the best and worst part of the day? And oftentimes that worst part of the day will come up in the conversation, or at least it creates an opportunity to begin a conversation. Because with a 4 and a 6-year-old, from my experience, and with children that age, it is very difficult to sit down and say, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings? And for them to be able to articulate back to you. It's not a conversation that developmentally they're prepared for, but it is when you're talking about very silly things during, the supper, what's your best and worst part of the day? And you're able to get some of that information out. And just briefly, one more thing too. One of the pieces that I do is through Children's Trust is I do training. One of my favorite trainings is engaging dads 101 for home visiting. And it's so special to me because in home visiting specifically and working with families, oftentimes it's mostly women that are working in the capacity with the families. It's just by nature of the field, and they have a very difficult time engaging dads, but also just even having conversations with dads, because they also are viewing, because of social media and all the stereotypes, they're also viewing dad as he doesn't need to be part of the child's, this family meeting, because that's mom's job, or mom can handle it, or mom can take care of it. But when we stop putting dad as a secondary person, and dads are listed on forms in doctor's offices as, secondary or the other. Well, secondary by definition means less than, not as important as the primary, as the first person. So when we start referring to dad as secondary and we start referring to dad like that, we become complacent as a society and allow dad to become complacent in these responsibilities. Now it's okay for dad to sit back and take a back seat in all of the parenting and the diaper changing and the bath time. And it's when mom and dad are both present, it's healthier for mom to have that kind of support and have someone else there also helping. And again, what Craig, recognizing what Craig had said earlier, that it's not always that type of a household, and we're trying to be very inclusive. This goes for I've had moms say, you know, well, how do I parent as a mom without the dad present? Moms are amazing teachers. Moms are incredibly patient. Moms can do all of those things. Dads and moms bring a different style of learning and a different style of teaching. But moms can do all of that same, all of those same things, because they can teach and they can be patient and they can be loving and affectionate. I actually think it's more the men that we have to sometimes help to understand that it's okay for them to be those things. Because when we're looking at empathy, that's built through relationships. That's not built through isolation. And oftentimes that's dad's first approach is to say, okay, you know, toughen up and, you know, be a man, or this is, you know, what are you crying for? Boys don't cry. It's through the building of relationships that children learn to trust, children learn empathy, children learn how to treat others and learn compassion. So a lot of the work that I do at Children's Trust is less direct care and less interacting, because we are an agency that supports programs. It's a quasi-state agency, nonprofit agency. And what we do is we support other programs and other nonprofit agencies in doing this work. But through my years, I've learned an awful lot about parenting from my own personal experiences, and also from my education and from the Nurturing Fathers programs. But being able to support all of these agencies and all of these professionals through this work, through the Children's Trust, has been incredibly rewarding. And I feel very thankful to be part of this panel tonight to talk a little bit more with the folks in the audience as we get some questions. So thank you, Craig, and thank you everyone for having me.
Of course, thank you. I want to give, if we had an audience, I'd say give our panelists a round of applause. Twinkles, maybe.
Wait, a standing ovation? Oh, come on, guys. I just saw the whole crowd get up.
Okay, there we are. We can do a little wave. That's great. So thank all three of you. Thank you, Mike. I'm going to ask a couple of questions to each of you, and I want people to think of your questions and type them up in the chat. We have someone watching. We're going to filter those questions forward and spend the next half hour talking. And panelists, if you have a question for each other, I'd love to hear what those might be. Mike, I wanted to ask you a question about how you find the process of fathers supporting other fathers, like dads connecting with dads, operates, and how, whether you find that important in the change process of learning.
Absolutely, so incredibly important. There aren't many groups where dads have the opportunity to get together and support each other. There are some. I'm such a strong advocate of the Nurturing Fathers group because that is one such place. But because of my own personal experience, like I said, being a single dad and being very fearful and not knowing even that it was okay to be afraid, because I've been taught that I can't be afraid and I can't be weak and I can't be sad, because those all things, that's what that means. So it's so incredibly important for dads to have a group, and it doesn't have to be an organized group. So there's other places that men congregate, that men get together with other men. And what men need to know is that it's okay to bring up things and bring up subjects that they wouldn't normally think. You'd be surprised at how much another man another dad may also want to talk about issues that they're having at home with raising their child or a stubborn behavior, but it's not something that they would think to bring up. So I think men need permission. They need to be told that it's okay to not know, to not have to fix everything, and to reach out to other guys. So the ideal situation would be to have a support group, a father support group, but there's other places where dads, like I said, a barbershop, and I purposely do that. You know, I create opportunities like that, moments of success almost, I guess. If I'm in a barbershop and there are a bunch of other guys, I'll talk about things that aren't sports related. And it's amazing how the dads will open up and the guys that are in there.
Sure. Well, you know, permission setting makes me think of some things you said, Heidi. You were talking about permissions and you had your permission slip. And I was wanting to ask you this question about how you would notice or help boys, and I guess olders as well, about connecting with feeling confused and unmanly when they're approaching these kinds of, when they're feeling confused and unmanly about a way of doing things, when they're out of the box. and how does that, how does that sort of work? Have you noticed that working? You're muted.
I'm not, I didn't quite catch the question.
Oh, I was asking, you're talking about permissions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking that one of the moments that are hard are when you're feeling confused and maybe out of the box, unmanly about being in a role of parenting. And how do you find that there's some of the things that you find where it's important at those moments?
From the perspective of a parent.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what I think is really, one thing I think about a lot as a parent, and then in running our fatherhood program for Maine Boys to Men, is that if we can sit with our own discomfort, we are then modeling how for our children how they can sit with their own discomfort, right? And to also bring that to the light, like to state what's happening and how you're feeling. For example, like, oh, I'm feeling really uncomfortable because I've never done this before. Or sometimes I feel uncomfortable when I try something new and I'm not good at it, or something like that, like elevating the awkwardness and showing them that that's just part of being a human being, right? Is that we have new experiences that don't always feel good to us, but that doesn't mean we can't do them.
So being supportive at those times.
Mm-hmm. Of ourselves too, right? Compassionate, showing compassion for others and ourselves.
So sometimes a role modeling aspect of that, which I was going to toss a question to you, Sam, about these moments of success that can be also about role modeling. Maybe if you give us another example that you were thinking about in learning to identify, to notice a moment of success.
So, again, it's kind of like being in the moment and just trying to see what's happening, and maybe even notice like when maybe your child is having compassion, even like a look on the face of them in a movie. When they're watching a movie, it's like, oh yeah, that was a very sad scene, and I can see that you're are having some empathy and having some compassion in that moment, because I found that sad also, and so it's like Heidi was saying, it's kind of being vulnerable ourselves in those moments and kind of like explaining it and sharing it to kind of like make it okay, but then also noticing our children's emotions and helping them label it. And so often our children don't even know what the emotions are. They don't even know what frustration is. All they know is that they're really angry about what happened. So you can say like, I can see that you're angry at this, what just happened. And I appreciate that you're hanging on to your big emotions. Again, reflecting back the moment of the irrefutable evidence of their capacity to do that. And we're literally shaping their muscle memory of that moment.
Thank you. So I wanted to see if, are we catching any questions in chat? I'm not sure. How about Charlie or Ryan or Craig?
I haven't gotten many, Craig. So if you want to go to the list from what the panelists have put forward, that'd be fine.
Sure. We can ask
when they're registered.
Of course, yeah. So thank you, all of you who are in the audience today, and your questions that you put into the registration form. We do have some of those in front of us, and we can pose some of those questions as a place to talk. And also, I would be happy to encourage the panelists if you have a question for one another. So think about that. Just give me the high sign if either of you have something you want to interject right now before I ask you a brilliant question. You can. Do you have something that you'd like to add? I will.
I was just thinking of a story, given what Sam was just talking about like highlighting the successes. And I remember my daughter was young, we used to cook together every Monday night, and we were making something, and I would do a part, and then I would let her have her turn to help. And there was this one part that I was doing the mixing, and she really wanted to do the mixing. And I said to her, I really like how you're being patient and waiting for your turn. And we moved on. And then it was like a year later, easily a year. and we were cooking together again, and she was doing it and was doing not a very good job with it. She's just a little kid. And I was just, you know, like, couldn't wait to get my hands on it and kind of fix it and do it. And she stopped and she looked at me and she said, Mom, you're doing such a great job waiting for your turn and being patient, you know? And I was just like, oh my God, like, there it is, right? Like, that's just such a little example of that, but how they really take in and then model that stuff back.
That they'll remember what you say, especially in these moments that Sam's not noticed, but where you can really be taken in. No, absolutely. So one of the questions that was seen prominent is some concern about social media and how, you know, how we kind of manage social media. And I suppose maybe it's about social media encouraging behavior or thoughts that we're not supportive of, or something like that. Let me ask, you know, each of you, if you have some thoughts about managing social media in this concept of supporting nurturing and empathy and what have you. Mike, do you have a response to that? Do you think about social media?
I do. I was smiling because my Boston Father Family Network on Friday this week, it's a 2.5-hour presentation on the positive and negative effects of social media, based on an entire book that was written on the positive and negative effects of social media. So I think it's such an enormous thing right now, in this day and age. What I try to do, I mean, managing it is a good start, but the problem is that children are always going to be influenced, and they're always going to see and hear, and it's going to be part of their lives. So I always like to try to model behavior, period, for so many reasons, but especially when it comes to social media. My teenage daughters, I've explained to them why, like, men are portrayed and dads are portrayed a certain way on social media. I've talked to them about some of the negativity and some of the ways that women are portrayed and viewed in maybe like the music industry and modeling. And we've talked about things like that, but with my my toddlers, they're, you know, of course, in a different place developmentally, but what we do is I try to model the behavior that I want them to know and understand as what it should be. So I want my boy to grow up knowing how to treat and respect other people. So I treat everyone, and especially women, very respectfully in his presence, because he's then going to grow up treating women respectfully. And I also do that in front of my daughters, so my daughters will grow up knowing how to be treated. So when something does happen to them that's a situation they shouldn't be in, that may be very familiar to social media, but it's going to feel like a red flag because it's not something that was familiar in their home. As opposed to if I model the same types of behavior that you might see on social media, or some of the negativity, well, if they were confronted with that with a teenage boy, it may seem very normal to them. It may not be a red flag at all. That's a very long, you know, winded kind of round the block answer, but I think it's just so difficult. And I will pass on too, just in case there's we do this in the future again, I'll pass on the presentation after I actually you know, watch it myself on Friday. I'll pass that on to you from the author.
Oh yeah, great. I mean, I think it's a big subject, and sounds to me a big part of your answer is role modeling and that sort of thing. And do other things come to mind with regard to managing in the environment of social media? Sam?
Yeah, I really think it's important for parents to have access to what kids are watching and to really pay attention and you know, really look at what they're seeing and have, you know, access to their passwords and you know, and sit down and look at it with them, look at the YouTube videos they're seeing, and even, you know, check out some of the texts that they're having with their friends. So much of the cyberbullying is happening that we don't even know about because it's happening within the social media. And so I think it's important that we're there and we can help them manage some of these things and you know, from early on, because you know, the adults are paying for these devices, and so you know, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube as far as like letting them have all the apps and all the devices. And so again, as much as possible, to be aware of what they're looking at, what they're doing, and so we can have conversations about it. And their job is to like not show it to us, right? But we have to insert ourselves into that as much as possible.
Sure. So join them in a sense, you know, be part of the conversation. Are you're agreeing with that, Heidi?
Yeah, we have a saying in our house that a phone and social media, all of that is a privilege, not a right. And so it's not a guaranteed thing. And we have, you know, phoneless days where we, as a family, we all put the phone in the basket and we do things. And I would say, you know, institutionalized or like, you know, give your children the gift of breaks throughout the week where they don't have access to their phone. So like, you know, at bedtime, all the phones in the family go in a basket downstairs or something like that, where they just have built in these breaks. And then the other thing I would say is feed the feed. So as you know, with social media, there's a feed. And, you know, just like you have access to the phone, I would ask my children to follow 7, 8, 9, 10 accounts that are about healthy relationships and are about violence prevention, and have that positive stuff be part of your children's feed, so that they're getting both sides of the story. The other thing I really like to do is we like to share our favorite social media TikToks or memes, and so we, as a family, we're modeling the pieces that are enjoyable and appropriate.
So in a way, so join them in this part of their lives.
I wanted to add on one thing to that too. As you were talking about all those parental controls and awareness, also just to be very aware that no matter how much we as parents try to be so cognizant of what our children are doing on their phones, they have friends' phones, they have phones that are at school. My daughters have their phones in class. So I don't know what it's like in other communities, but in the community that we're from, the phones are allowed in school. They're not allowed to use them in class, but they're allowed to bring them to school. They have them in their pocketbooks and their book bags right in school. Yeah. So I unfortunately sometimes feel helpless and can only use modeling and can only use communication because no matter what kind of parental controls I have on devices or what I do in the home, I'm not worried so much what they're doing here. It's what I'm worried about what they're doing when they're with their friends in school, or even friends that they don't have close relationships with. And the stories that I hear, I'm trying to talk to them about the dangers of drugs and gateway drugs. And they're telling me about all their friends that have moms that smoke marijuana with them. Yeah. So it really is a very, very serious problem and a difficult thing to try to address. Social media, but I mean, I love what everybody said, and I think control is the start, without a doubt.
Sure, but joining your children and in your family is having a conversation is an important foundation, so you can at least know and talk. There's a question here that's really, I think, a harder question, but I'm just going to read it and see where you come from here. If you've already, the ship's already sailed, let's say, on destructive behavior. You're having this already. You're coping with it as a father or mother with a child or a boy child. How do you walk it back? How do you kind of turn the ship? This is a question from an audience member. We're having this trouble. What do we do? Sam, do you want to say something?
Well, with destructive behavior, one thing I advocate is, the pause, the timeout type of thing, to like intervene and stop the behavior. And then after the behavior is stopped, you can then kind of like say, I appreciate you stopping that behavior. But there are times that some behavior is more destructive and more hurtful. And so then I basically would say, I think it's important for you to repair that, and I'm going to hold all your privileges until you repair that. And they might say, well, what do you mean repair? It's like, I don't know. I think you hurt that person's feelings. And so, I think you need to fix that. And so then they might say, well, what if I give them apology? So that would be a great start, and so it's kind of a little bit of a restorative justice and helping someone have compassion for what the other person is going for, but not mandating an apology. If that makes sense.
it must be a difficult moment for a parent to recognize that this is like, I know I've got a rolling boil here. How do I walk it back? Michael or Mike or Heidi, do you have a thought in this way? No.
Yeah, my thought is not that dissimilar from Sam's, which is, you know, going back to this, instead of holding the problem like between you, you know, like having it in between the relationship, like have it, put it over here and look at it together, right? So this is how I'm feeling about the behavior I saw, or the way I've seen you acting, or this is the impact it had on me, and these are the things I'm concerned about, I statements. And then, you know, how are you seeing this? How is this affecting you? Like, I'd like to hear about that. Like, and then what might we do? Like, what can I do to, you know, to look at this differently, or see this, or help you? And what can you do? You know, like but like looking at it together with some spaciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And then even kind of like an understanding that what you're triggered by. And so it's to take your big reactions and big emotions out of it as much as possible. Because then what happens is the child is reacting to your reactions, as opposed to what Heidi's saying, reacting to the incident of what's going on. So whether it takes talking to, you know, another person or a peer, or whatever you need to do to reset yourself and come from a more calm place, I think is critical, to take your emotions out of the situation, so to help them take accountability for some of their behaviors. Don't do it for me, do it for, because it's the right thing to do.
Right, finding time to do it. That is
I would just say that I think most young people want a hand out of the corner that they put themselves in 99.9% of the time, that they would love a hand out of that corner they've painted themselves into. Yeah.
There's a question here that says, how do you help get a teenager to open up? You know, that's really not talking. And you know, Mike?
I would say, almost just building on what was just said, it's the moment that you're taking the opportunity to get them to open up, because trying to get a teenager to open up about a specific thing by asking them that thing isn't going to work, and they're going to shut down. But bringing that kind of backdoor approach in, where there's another moment in time, again, it's almost like what Sam said earlier. It's taking that moment of either success or it's just a very different moment to really capitalize on one thing and then bring it into that behavior. Because I've had these conversations with my teenage daughters recently about different behaviors or different things, or specifically, and it wasn't in the moment that I needed to address it. It was in a completely different, sometimes a day later. So, you know, to the previous question, to try to unwind a behavior, I still think that applies. Being able to address it, not during the behavior, is key. But also, if you're trying to get a teenager to open up, it's tough to have a conversation with a teenage daughter about drugs and their friends and drug use and parents and what their thoughts and feelings are. But doing it when, you know, it's a silly moment, as opposed to a very serious moment, you're going to get a lot more back from that teenager.
Sure.
And you know, like Michael's saying, it's like you kind of like make a footnote, like, okay, this is something I need to address, and you kind of look for that moment to address that. And often car rides are a good time to you know, address these, where you're kind of both looking forward. You don't have to, you know, have the intensity of the eye contact. It sometimes can really help teens open up.
One of the questions in our list is, how do you help boys with their feelings, or to talk about their feelings? You know, what's the best approach? And it sounds like we've kind of captured that a bit in this conversation. You know, that there are some things to talk about, but I would just want to offer a place to talk about is to talk about your own, particularly with males and male children. If the adult male is there and can talk about their feelings, it's a strong moment.
It's almost modeling again that behavior. If I have a 6-year-old boy and he sees me talk about my emotions, talk about my feelings, talk about things that bother me, you know, react to sadness in an appropriate way, and then he's learning from watching me. And right now I am his hero. So every move I make, and I know this, so every move I make is critical. And everything that I do, he's going to do. So I think with boys, I think modeling is important. And if a male role model isn't present, again, I said moms can be great teachers. Sure. It's moms letting boys know that it's okay to talk about their feelings, and mom can share her own feelings. Let her know it's okay to talk about her feelings, and that it's okay to be angry, and you don't have to, it's okay to cry.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
I would also say, you know, listening without judgment, and not even, you know, just really like just listening versus, you know, jumping on to comment or jumping up to say your thing, or just like that spaciousness. And then also this exercise that Michael brought up as well, we call it porcupines and puppies, like best and worst of the day, highs and lows. If that just becomes, you know, something you do every night at dinner, or something you do every time you're in the car, or it begins to build that skill of identifying feeling and sharing feeling and connecting it to experience. And it starts bringing all those pieces together for somebody, a young person in their brain, of becoming really practiced at that skill.
Sure.
And also,
and they don't even see it coming.
That's a great point. Also, like with teens and preteens, sometimes it's you just kind of do it a little drive-by. You just kind of toss something out there. It's like, yeah, you know, sometimes it's really hard to be with friends or whatever just happened. You just kind of like say something and leave it there, and then get out of there. And then you kind of planted a seed to kind of return to.
Right.
And you know, Heidi said, listen without judgment. I just, I want to say, especially for men, that's something that we need to work on, because we are programmed to solve problems, to even in relationships, you know, not even just with our children. You know, we're programmed to have an answer for everything, to try to solve the problem, to try to fix it. So being able to just listen without judgment and just be quiet and not come up with a solution, or not come up with anything at all, is very difficult, I think, for us. So I think it's so key and so important, the point that Heidi just made about listening without judgment, and just listening, period.
Sure. It's not in the man box. I mean, it is.
No, it's outside, definitely.
It is, you know, to be knowledgeable. Maybe I don't have an answer. Maybe I don't know how to listen, because I just want to give you a solution and move on. So these are trainings to unlearn, and probably that these fathers groups and discussion groups help unlearn those things, and you kind of identify some of these specific things. So we're in our last 10 minutes. Time is moving along here for us, I'm happy to say, and it's been terrific. One of the questions was, what about, you know, I have a girl. How does this land? How does this with girls? You know, what do we want our girls to hear about in this material? You know, what is the new material for girls about masculinity, about boys, and about this? Is there something about girls that come to your mind that you really want to encourage parents to hold? Heidi?
Yeah, I would say that similar to masculinity, you know, femininity is it's a social construct, right? It's an agreed upon idea that we all agree upon about how people should and shouldn't act, and anything you can do within your household, your community, to stop limiting people who are human beings first, before they're ever identified as any gender, you know, to be their whole self, their whole expanded selves, whatever that looks like. Supporting, that's how they'll feel within themselves. And if you're supporting that from outside, that'll help them with alignment. And then it will help everyone around them to live their biggest, most expansive life as well.
Thank you. Sam, do you have a thought on this question?
Yeah, just what Heidi said, you know, help them be comfortable with who they are and what they have to offer. And if they feel comfortable with what they have to offer, then they will connect with others around them. Sure. and you know, have that voice and not lose that voice that, you know, girls so often lose in middle school, you know.
Sure. Thank you. Something come to you have girls, Mike. I know you mentioned it a couple of times.
Yeah. No, so much was coming to mind, and I definitely agree. Again, I'm so lucky to have the opportunity to be doing it right now in the moment at the age where Harrison wants to paint his nails because he has 3 sisters, and where I cut the grass and I involve Lily because I'm so fortunate to know that I should, because 15 years ago, I may not have known that. But now when we cut the grass, Lily cuts the grass, Harry cuts the grass. That's not our job for either or. That's a job for both of them to come help daddy cut the grass, get dirty, get in the mud. Just so happens Lily doesn't love cutting the grass and would prefer to be in a ballerina dress twirling around in the yard, but I still get her involved in all of those same activities. And she learns from the experiences with Harrison by my reactions when he says he wants to paint his nails, that I say, okay, sure. You know, and it is very difficult. We've had conversations about it. You know, what does that mean outside the house? Is that something that he can do here? Is it something he can do at school? What are the ramifications at school? Is it allowed at school? Those are all conversations that have to be had. He hasn't wanted to. He just wanted to do it and play with his sisters. But it's a conversation that is difficult and needs to be had, because it's difficult because he's 6, so he doesn't understand why the conversation even needs to take place. As far as if he's going to go to school, why it will be allowed, how he may or may not be treated, how he may be welcomed or maybe not welcomed. So again, it's the modeling. I model the behavior that I want my children to have, and I have my girls do the same. So I don't think they're taught any differently based on their gender. Almost the way Heidi said, they're looked at first as just a human being. So whatever they want to do and explore and feel and think, that's what they do. And my teenage daughters, I think for that reason, feel very open to come to me to ask me about and talk to me about sexuality and talk to me about things that they may not go to another dad about.
Sure. And I can tell that you're a naturally a strongly involved dad. You know, you're there with them, with the kids. That makes a big difference. I imagine, you know, that gives them strength. So I want to think about where we need to close the program this evening. It's been wonderful. I'm going to see if Ryan, if you have some thoughts you want to share to wrap this up for us. And I want to thank all of you for your time and for your thoughts. And as a resource, there's resources in chat, and there'll be resources that we could share possibly later over Facebook, and this recording will become available as well.
Yeah, thanks, Craig.
Sure.
Everybody, I have your emails from the registration, so I'll be sure to send you the resources from Heidi, as well as Sam and Michael's connections and information piece. I think one thing that I just want to add is we're going to do a feedback form. This is our first time doing this. And I think it would be helpful for us to know like what worked and what didn't, and where we can make some improvements so we can do something similar, and hopefully this was beneficial. The other piece I just want to do a small pitch is if you're a man in the community and you want to be part of Men4MAAV, we're always looking to add some members, and it's could be a real good place to talk about these things as well and be a part of the community. So we'd love to have you. Thanks again for coming. Very much appreciated. And I'll send you guys all the documents and the insights of tonight. Hope it was worth your time. Thanks again. Thanks, panel.